Welcome to Answers That Count. If you own a business, you can count on us to give you the answers you need to succeed in all aspects of your business. And now, here's your host, Charles Musgrove.
Welcome back, everyone. I am Charles Musgrove, your host of Answers That Count. Welcome back for another exciting show. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a good ride with these shows, and we've been talking a lot of economics and how economics apply to today's market, today's environment, and we've looked at how it applies to some of the political talk that we see today and some of the political activity. So today we're going to talk about prices bring the choice of buyers and sellers into balance. So we have back on the show Joe Calhoun, Professor of Economics at Florida State University. Welcome back, Joe.
Thanks. It's great to be back. Always enjoy our time together, Charles.
All right, Professor Joe, as I like to call you. So, check us out on podcasts. We got a website, answersthatcount.com. So we've got some cool articles out there. We've even got some articles about the shows we've done with Professor Joe. So we talk economics and put some charts and graphs out there to kind of make it interesting. So check that out, and let's talk about the book to get started. So this is the book. I'm going to hold that up. This is the book that we're talking about, and Joe Calhoun is one of the co-authors on this book. So Professor Joe, just like we've done in the other shows, give us a little intro to what this book is about and how exciting it is. Even though it's economics, it's still exciting.
Oh, absolutely. I think, of course, I'm very biased here, but I think economics is the most interesting, important topic on the planet. So always love talking about it. Appreciate you giving me a forum to do that. So the the book is what we call a primer, and that means we're just trying to get the wheels turning here. We're trying to get some people to know just the basics. It's not meant to go into great detail. It's not meant to provide a bunch of really sophisticated theory. It's just trying to get the pump priming on people's thought process, getting them exposed to these ideas in maybe ways that they either never have or maybe have only seen a little bit. So we're just trying to get the conversation started. And then if you're interested, there's all kinds of other books that go into way more detail and get into advanced theories, but we're just trying to get things going here. So my good friends, Jim Gortney, Tawny Ferrarini, Dwight Lee, and Rick Stroop teamed up on an earlier version, and they wanted to make some changes. We call it the third edition. So they thought I might have a few things to contribute. So they brought me on board, and we've just had a lot of fun getting the book out there and getting students to read it around the country and using it in the classroom. So it's been a really great project for us.
Yeah, it's been very good. And I think you said last week that y'all are looking at doing an edition 4. This is edition 3. So are y'all looking at a 4th?
Yes, the third edition came out in 2016, and because it's used as an official textbook in some classrooms, the general rule with a book in a classroom is a teacher doesn't like the book to be more than 5 years old. So we're coming up on that 5-year anniversary, and we're thinking about doing a 4th edition of the book. It wouldn't be anything hugely different, but there's always some improvement. There's always some updates, especially with recent macroeconomic policy and, of course, the pandemic that we're going through and the economic consequences there. So we always have some new things to talk about. So we're thinking very seriously about doing a new edition and how we can make the book even better than what it is right now.
Good. It's one thing that you mentioned there was the pandemic, and we are September the 4th, and today is Friday when we're doing this recording, and typically the first Friday of every month, we get the NFP report, which is a non-farm payroll. So that's a big economic report that we got out this morning, and I'm sure you saw that. We had, I think, an addition of 1.4 million jobs, which I believe was pretty much as expected. So not below, not above, but that's better than what the ADP report that came out on Wednesday, where the added jobs were lower than what expectation was. So that was good to see those NFP jobs come out like they did.
Yeah. The general rule of thumb from the federal government is the first Friday of every month is when the official unemployment numbers come out. Now, if that Friday happened to be like the very first day of the month, then they would push it back a week just so they can have more time to collect that information. But yeah, first Friday is a highly anticipated date. That's a very important number for anybody who's interested in economics. So it's good that you're following that.
Absolutely. I saw the actually I was doing some work and I saw the market open, but I don't know how the market reacted to that. I did see where the unemployment number was went down to 8.3. So good to see it go below 10. And
yeah, there's something really psychological, meaningful when we get into single digits. I mean, it's just like when you go to the store and you see 9.99. That just feels a whole lot different than $10. It's just something about adding that extra digit in there, and it's the same thing with unemployment. People just feel a whole lot better about something with one number before the decimal point as opposed to two numbers before that decimal point. So just from a psychological point of view, that number was really good, and then the fact that it did come down from previous months is also really important.
Yeah, that's good, and it's good that we're. It looks like we're sticking our head up out of the water on this recession and coming out of the pandemic. And when you consider some of the larger states that are still in pretty much full lockdown, like New York, and I think California still has a pretty big lockdown. So some of the larger states are still in lockdown. So if you think about it, that is when we get those things back, when we get those states back open, that'll really be another boost to the economy, and hopefully those NFP numbers will improve even better.
Yeah, and the state level unemployment always lags the federal. So roughly 3 or 4 weeks after the federal number comes out, the government will report the state level data. So there's always a lag there. We have to be a little bit more patient with that data. But you're absolutely right. It's important to get the big states like California, Florida, Texas, and the other heavily industrialized states back on their feet and jobs at full capacity as quickly as possible. So we're going to anticipate those numbers greatly.
Yeah, and I was reading a report, part of a report this morning about some of the in economics, some of the industries that have been impacted, and it's just what you would think. It's the entertainment industry, it's the restaurant, it's the hospitality industry. Surprisingly, some of the markets that have done well are your real estate markets, the home buying market. That's done well. That market is really
I've heard various people talk about. I've got a couple of friends who are out searching for homes right now, and I've got another friend who's trying to sell his home, and a couple other friends that are realtors, and they're telling me things are quite robust right now, that there's a lot of activity in the home market. So that has very thankfully seemed to not be dramatically negatively impacted by the pandemic. People are still moving, they're still buying and selling. And that market is, I wouldn't say unaffected, that's too extreme, but it hasn't been affected as negatively as many others. And that's good news, because a lot of Americans have their wealth tied in their homes, and we certainly don't want any of that wealth destroyed like we saw back in 2008. That was really devastating.
Yeah, that really hit home, pun intended, for a lot of people when that happened. But this is very anecdotal, but you see markets like Florida, and you've seen that reported, where the real estate market in Florida is doing really well, and over in Northwest Florida, the real estate market is booming. And this is anecdotal, but it looks like there's people that are moving from some of the larger cities into the places like Northwest Florida or some of the rural areas. So it's very interesting to see how this pandemic has affected that market. When we say that it hasn't been affected, well, maybe it has been. Maybe that's what's caused some of the surge in the real estate boom in some of the different areas. I mean, you see a lot of reports on people fleeing New York City. They're trying to get out of New York City for many reasons: the economy, the civil unrest, the violence. So people are moving out of places like that, and they're moving to places, a lot of this where they don't have to work in an office building, where they can work remote. That gives them the flexibility to really work from anywhere.
Yes, and that will be one positive side effect of this pandemic is as businesses and people have to reshuffle and restructure the way they do things, sometimes they're going to realize, wow, this is actually a whole lot better, and this is more productive and better for my employees. They don't have to spend time commuting. They don't have to spend gas money. They can just wake up, roll out of bed, and get working right away and still get the job done in a very effective manner, and sometimes maybe even a more effective manner.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think, I mean, this is really, really strange and off topic of what we're going to discuss, but the commute, you mentioned people are more effective. If you just think about the commuting time that people spend, even a conservative 30-minute travel to and from a day, that may not sound like a lot, but that's at least an hour a day that you have back into your schedule. So how do you use that? Do you use it for more productive use? Do you have it for more personal time? You probably wouldn't pick time to have windshield time if you had free time. So that's an added benefit to it also. Now, I'm not ignoring the fact that there probably are some downside to that as well, but that is an upside, and that is a potential more effective use of your time during the day.
Yeah, and actually, just this morning, I had a Zoom meeting, and one of my participants had to leave because he had to jump over to a different Zoom meeting. We were kind of teasing him about his commuting time. The commute time between Zoom calls
Right.
is only a few seconds. You end one and you click start and you jump over to the other one. Where if we were in an office setting, or if we were on campus, you'd have to allocate a little bit more time to leave one meeting, walk to the other place, get started. So, there are benefits. You're right. We can't completely ignore the costs, but we do need to celebrate and appreciate those benefits that we're capturing here.
Yeah, it's always good to look on the positive side of things and recognize that there are some downside to that. There's a benefit to be able to have human interaction where you see people and you can they're there in the office with you. So that is a downside that we lose that, but let's don't just focus on the downside. Let's look at some of the upside benefits of it as well.
Yeah. Let's try and look at the bright side of things. Let's try and put our best foot forward and have the best attitude that we can. That's what I'm telling my colleagues. That's what I'm telling my students. It's not going to do any good. We're not going to move forward by sitting around and complaining all day.
Absolutely. All right, Joe, I have delayed this and we've talked about some important and some very current topics that are affecting everybody today. So I don't want to minimize the effect of what we talked about to begin with, but let's jump on to the subject of today, prices. Get us started, Professor Joe.
Prices. So what I want you to think about, in kind of an analogy, just to help people start to put their brains around this, we take the price system for granted. And it's really, really important, and it conveys a lot of information. Prices are not just numbers and not just formulas at a cashier that tell us what the final bill is. The price system is an allocation method. It's a way of conveying information. So for a moment, I want you to think about operating a motor vehicle or your lawnmower or anything that's got an engine in there without any oil.
That will not run very long.
Everybody knows that's not going to go well, and you're not going to be able to operate that car, that machine for very long without it breaking down. It's going to start smoking, and it's just simply going to break if there's not adequate lubrication in there. And the price system, in some respects, can be thought of in that regard. Imagine going to the store, and there were no numbers on the shelf. There were no prices. How would you begin to make decisions about what to buy and how much of it to buy? And also think about every time that you went up to the cashier, you had to spend time negotiating. So let's just imagine that instead of the Publix cashier just scanning items, the Publix cashier was an auctioneer. All right, well, how much? What are you going to start the bidding at? Can you imagine how long it would take to get out of the grocery store if you had to make decisions without a price, if you had to negotiate every little thing? I mean, if you think the lines are long and take a lot of time now, oh my gosh, it would take you hours. Can you imagine waiting behind three people and they had to negotiate every price for a whole buggy full of groceries?
That would be terrible.
That would take forever.
Yeah.
So the prices work the same way. So when you go into the store and you see something for $1 and you see something else for $2, obviously that math is really easy, but much beyond the math, what that tells you is that item for $2 is twice as expensive, you're going to have to pull out twice as much money as you did for the other item. And it helps you allocate your resources. You may say, you know what, I'd really like that $2 item, but I don't really want to spend $2. I'd rather only spend $1 to get a similar item. So it helps you allocate your resources. It helps you allocate your time. It helps you decide what to buy, when to buy it. The producer is also conveying important information. Now, it doesn't always work out this way, but generally we can think about the $2 item is probably going to have much different characteristics than the $1 item. It's probably going to be a higher quality. It's going to have some different attributes to it. And that $2 is going to help you obtain that information so that you don't have to, read the ingredients. You don't have to read the specifications. If you're looking at two different TVs and one is $200 and another one's $500, it's a very logical assumption to think that the $500 TV is better.
Right.
It's got more things in there because it's $500, not $200.
Right.
And, we don't like to use the words cheap, but, everybody knows what we mean. I mean, really, the better term is less expensive or a lower price. But, we do know that, lower prices do have certain connotations. They maybe are not just less expensive. Sometimes they are cheap. Maybe the quality is really poor. But that is all conveyed in that price. And it's really important that we recognize that that's what the price system does. It's an allocation method. It's an information. It's almost like a language all to itself. We can use numbers to substitute for a lot of words that help us make these economic decisions.
I like that. And that is, I appreciate you putting the emphasis on numbers. That is, I'm a numbers guy. So yeah, that's another important value of numbers.
Sure. I mean, it also gives us a method of accounting as well. So something near and dear to your heart. It's not just methods. It's a way of organizing. It's a way of structuring ourselves so that I know that I have to put in my ledger, or if I'm going to let my mobile app do it, how much went into my checking account and how much went out of it. So there is a very important mathematical structure that prices convey. We know how much we're going to spend. We know how much we're going to earn, and that's expressed in numbers and in formulas. So there's just lots and lots that's compacted into this price system, and we need to make sure that we don't distort it. So, because when you distort it, then you start making poor decisions. And we certainly don't want to make poor decisions. We want to make wise decisions. So the more accurate those numbers are, the more that we allow those numbers to tell us, then we get the decision making that we like.
The better the decision, the better off we are. So usually that if we have better information, then we make a better decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we're never going to have perfect information. You're never going to be so full of knowledge that you know everything, but we certainly want to know more versus less.
Right. So I was reading the chapter and I saw these familiar terms of supply and demand, and there's
supply and demand. So really what supply and demand are trying to do is help us understand decision making by two market participants. So any market has to have two participants. You have to have a willing buyer and a willing seller. If you only have one of those, you don't have a market.
Right.
And I remind my students of that all the time. Don't just think that, hey, I'm a buyer, therefore I'm in a market. No, you're just a buyer. You got to have the other side. So we have to have supply and demand. So what demand allows us to do is either through a mathematical formula or a picture or a whole bunch of words, a demand is trying to help us understand the decision making of the buyer, somebody who demands, who wants that particular item. So we can just think about, the market for sweet tea. Okay, we got people who would like to drink sweet tea. Those are the demanders. We want to know, how do they make decisions? So the law of demand is going to help us understand that. And on the other side, you've got people who are willing to supply, who are willing to offer for sale the sweet tea. So we want to understand, how do they make decisions? What's important for them? And when certain dynamic elements of the economy change, like price or other non-price factors, how are those demanders and suppliers going to respond? And what we know from historical evidence is derives from the law of demand. The law of demand says if price goes down, people will buy more, and if price goes up, people will buy less. Now, that's very intuitive, but there's a whole lot more beyond that. Let's skip over that for now. Let's just grab onto the intuitive part of it. And then on the other side, the law of supply tells us that as price goes up, the producer is willing to offer more for sale.
Right.
And when the price goes down, the producer is willing to offer less.
Right.
And then just imagine, a typical auctioneer, you kind of throw out a price, you see how people react, and then that price gets pushed up or pushed down depending on the market participants and how they value that product. If you start with really high, it will get pushed down. If you start really low, it'll get pushed up. So what I always like to stress to my students and other people who are listening, talking to me about markets, the really important thing is that a market is a process. It's over time as these market participants interact that we actually settle on a price. It's called equilibrium or market clearing. But at any given time, those market participants change their mind and that price moves up or down. But it's that process over time that really captures what a market is, not just a moment in time.
That's a good way to look at it. I often get with the business that I'm in, I often help clients sell their business or either buy a business. And the question always comes up, what is the value of that business, or what's the right price to pay for that business? And with many of the businesses and clients we deal with, they're not sold on the New York Stock Exchange, so there's not a readily available market price that you can determine. You can't go to the Wall Street Journal, open it up, and see a price there. So what I try to tell clients, whether they're buying or selling, and it goes back to what you said, that there's two participants. There's a buyer and there's a seller. And to determine that price, there's an agreement between those two parties. And the fair price on that is, what is someone willing to pay for it, and what is that buyer willing to sell for it? That is the determination of what that fair price is at that point in time.
Yeah, and you stated that so well, and this is sometimes missed in the conversation as well. Willingness to buy and willingness to sell. Willingness is going to be a little bit different than the actual.
Right.
You might be willing to buy something for 10, but if you go in the store and the price is 8, okay, you actually you get it for 8 then.
Right.
Nobody's going to go up to the cashier and say, I really was willing to pay 10. The price is 8, so here's $10 and you keep it. No, we're going to take the $8 with a smile on my face. But willingness to do it. And this is where price is sometimes very subjective as well, where you may look at an item or a business and you may have one willingness to buy, and I'm going to look at it and say, no, I'm going to have a different willingness. So sometimes we may not agree. We're both buyers, but yet we have different values. We have different characteristics, different desires. So our willingness, and as these market participants interact, that's how they eventually settle on a price. So If we could role play for a moment, if you're a buyer and I'm a seller, we're going to have a little bit of back and forth. We're going to negotiate until we find something that we can both agree on. Now, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes we agree to disagree and we say, you know what, we just don't have a close enough meeting of the mind here. Your willingness and my willingness are too far away, so therefore we're just not going to be able to enter into a deal. And you see that with the real estate market all the time, right? I might be selling my home for $100,000, and you may say, you know what, I'm really only willing to pay 90, and I say, you know what, I'm not willing to go below 100, so we just agree to part ways. And I wait for somebody else more like-minded to come along.
Yeah,
I don't want to give the impression that this always is going to find a solution. Sometimes we just walk away and say, you know what, we can't here, and we just move on to the next market process.
Yeah, I think the real estate that's a process most people are familiar with, and it's easier to relate to as well. So that there's a lot of people that shop for homes, and they may even make a contract on it, but they don't end up closing because somebody else comes in with a better price that they want to buy it, or the seller never meets their willingness number. So I think that's a very good
and
one.
for people who maybe don't have any experience in the housing market, the other market that is open to much negotiation is the labor market.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
if you're the employer and I'm the employee, you may advertise a specific salary or an hourly wage, and then I walk in and we get to know each other a little bit, and maybe that changes a little bit. So I say, you know what, I saw that you were offering X amount. I think I'm worth a little bit more than that, and then we start the negotiation. That's a very important market, the labor market. That's how we all earn our income. And you think about that is also subject to a lot of negotiation. Again, it's just back and forth. The only thing we need to remember is that in the labor market, the employee is the supplier and the employer is the demander because they demand the job to get done. But the basic principles work the same. It's the interaction, law of demand, law of supply still apply, but it's just a little different in the labor market because we think about the consumer being the demander, and here the employee is actually the supplier of labor services and the employer is the demander of labor services. But everything else works the same.
Yep, I like how you really put that in terms of what we see on an everyday basis. So we've got a business being bought and sold, we've got real estate being bought and sold, and then what most people can relate to is their own time that they're buying or selling. So if they're selling their time, that's their inventory. That's the good that they have to sell. And the employer is the buyer in that case, and they're gonna put a value on that and a willingness that they will pay for your time.
Yeah. The most important asset that each one of us has is ourselves.
Right.
Our time, our effort, our physical abilities, our mental and emotional abilities, and quite frankly, when we go into the labor market, we offer those for sale. We say, I'm willing to give that of myself. I'm willing to give my time, my talent, my energy, and hopefully you have a willing buyer, an employer who says, yes, I see the value. Let's make an exchange. You come to work. I'll pay you at the end of the pay period. And that's what the labor market is.
Good. I like that. And Joe, I know you've got a lot more to talk about on this, but we've got about a minute to wrap up this subject on price. So give us the final thoughts that we have not covered thus far. I know there's a cool chart in here. I think the chart's pretty neat, but that may not be what you want to spend your time describing.
Yeah, the graph is just a way to say something in pictures that would take much longer to do in words. So a graph is just a convenient tool so that we can talk a little bit faster. And that old saying, picture is worth 1,000 words. So what I can do in a picture, I can just do faster than I can with a whole bunch of words. So it's just a way to communicate a little bit faster. But I think, if everybody can just recognize the importance of the price system as an exchange of information, much more than just numbers out there on store shelves, then I think we can appreciate it and hopefully use it to our advantage. And that's really what I want people to know about the price system.
Very good, Joe. I appreciate it. And bodies here are always a great time that I've got where we can have a real informal discussion about what's going on in the economy, talk about economics, and look at a theory that's in the book that you have written or co-authored. And that's always a good time for me. It provides some good information for the audience as well. So thank you for taking your time on Friday. We'll do it again next week, and we'll pick up on number 7 of the theory. So a lot of stuff in here. We're still on the first few pages of this book. So
yeah, we got a lot of great stuff to cover. So I hope everybody comes back for more.
I'm sure they will. And Professor Joe, have a great weekend, and keep the economy rolling, brother.
I'll do what I can. Thanks.
All right. Thank you for joining us on another great episode of Answers That Count. I'm your host, Charles Musgrove. Check us out on all your popular podcast channels. We're on YouTube. We're at AnswersThatCount.com. Leave me a note. Let me know what you'd like to talk about on the show. If you'd like to be a guest on the show. Also, we got a Facebook page up at Answers That Count. So check us out there. Have a great day. Have a blessed week. See you next week. Peace.
Answers That Count is brought to you by the Bean Team. For all your business accounting needs, visit beanteam.com for more info. You can listen to more episodes of Answers That Count on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio, or visit AnswersThatCount.com.